Good morning. Welcome to Auburn Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, located on occupied ancestral land of the Muscogee Creek Nation. My name is Aisha Alam, and I will be serving as your service associate today. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home. Many of us once, too, were seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do all of that here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. Whether it's your first time with us or your 100th time, we hope that you'll find here questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious views that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. On behalf of the members of the fellowship, I extend a special welcome to all visitors who are joining us for the first time, and to those of you who still feel like visitors. If you have not already done so, please fill out a digital visitor card by visiting auuf.org/visitor so that we may welcome you. You may also contact our minister, Rev. Chris Rothbauer, at minister@auuf.org with any questions or concerns that you may have. Let us move into the service, willing to be authentic with each other, honest within ourselves, and open to connection in all forms.
Our opening words are from Libby D. Stoddard. We have come into this room of hope, where our hearts and minds are opened to the future. We have come into this room of justice, where we have set aside our fear to name freely every oppression. We have come into this room of love, where we know that no lives are insignificant. We have come into this room of song, where we unite our voices in the somber and the beautiful melodies of life.
For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible,
we forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
for falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit,
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive
many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
I invite you to light your chalice with us this morning with these words from Maureen Killeran. The poet Langston Hughes has written, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly." May this chalice flame challenge each of us to cherish to our dreams, for all doing begin in the courage and inspiration of a dream. As is our tradition, we also light a candle in solidarity with those families separated at our southern border. I would like to invite you to join in our opening hymn, hymn number 1009 in the Teal hymnal, Meditation on Breathing. The words will be shared on the screen.
Okay, number 1009, there's three parts. There's drone, there's melody, and then there's a descant. There are going to be drones, Terry's going to be melody, Laura's going to do descant. Do whatever part you feel comfortable or just sit and listen. They do it quite well.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
I would like to invite you to join, I'm sorry. I lost my place just a little bit. I would like to invite you, I'm so sorry. One of the ways we proclaim the warmth and caring of our community is by sharing our joys, concerns, and milestones. We invite those who wish to use the Zoom chat box to type your joy, concern, or milestone during the music for meditation. If you wish for your joy or concern to be acknowledged, but don't want to share it, you may also type that you have an unspoken joy or concern. Andrew D. has a joy. He would like to say thanks to Ruth Crocker, Connie, and Ralph Ressler for all the kindness they have shown him throughout the years. Laura Kloberg has a concern. The auction deadline is October the 30th. And she has not received very many entries as of yet. Please contact Laura to meet this deadline. If you have any contributions that you would like to have repeated from last year, please also email Laura about it by October the 30th. Are there any others? A religious community is like a river formed from the many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time and energy, our creativity, imagination, and vision, our talents, skills, and gifts, and the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad, a river that is made of many streams, sustains life, and refreshes the land through which it flows. But the river of this community also depends on our shared financial support that makes real our shared values and vision. We will now receive an offering for the support of this fellowship religious community and its work in the world. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. To make a donation online via PayPal, please visit auuf.org/donate. If you are writing a check, please make your check payable to AUUF with a note on the memo line about whether it is for the offering or your pledge, and mail it to P.O. Box 669, Auburn, Alabama 36831. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Where's the audio?
May you dare to dream dreams. May you dare to seek the truth. May you know your power to act. May love be your guide. May you walk with head held high. May your heart raise to the sky. May you see life's gift to you. May love be your guide, May love be your guide.
Hi, everyone. We're going to be talking about a subject that's hard for some people to talk about today, and that is mental health. And what mental health means is how healthy you are in your brain and in your emotions. So sometimes, even though you want to feel happy, sometimes you feel sad, either because something has happened to you or because you just don't feel like being happy. And sometimes people will tell you that you should just be happy, that that's the way to go, right? Well, I want to read you a story today that's all about how sometimes we can't avoid how we feel. But if someone in your life is feeling sad, it's not necessarily your fault. And the story that I've picked out for us today is one that I really like. It's called The Color Thief, a family story of depression. My dad's life was full of color. Every day, clouds smiled at him and waved hello. We went walking together. We saw green hills snoozing in the afternoon light and bright flowers singing to the sun. But one day, Dad was full of sadness, all the way to the top. He said his sky had turned gray. I thought I had done something wrong, but he told me I hadn't. Soon every day became a sad day for Dad. He only saw the sun sulking, clouds frowning, rain crying. We didn't go walking. We didn't go do anything anymore. Outside, the trees stood silently, shaking their heads. Dad stayed inside and looked at the window. He said that if he went outside, the lampposts would laugh at him, or the street would call him names. Well, I thought I had done something wrong, but he told me I hadn't. He said that all the colors were gone. Someone had stolen them away, just taken them, one by one. He said he felt sad and stuck, like a marble in a bottle. Have you ever felt so sad that it just felt like all the color in your life has been gone? We kind of see that here, don't we? When the phone rang, he told it to go away. When the doorbell buzzed, he pretended not to hear it. I gave him hugs. We all gave him hugs. But he put those hugs away in a box. Do you see his box up here with Mom and the son and his dog and his cat too? We put those feelings and hugs away in a box, and then he closed the curtains and stayed in bed all day. I thought I had done something wrong, but he told me I hadn't. I felt lonely. There was a heavy feeling inside me, and I missed my dad. I missed the sound of his laugh and his smiling eyes. I drew a picture of him inside a big ice cube. Dad went to see important people at a hospital. They told him he was very ill and gave him medicine for his mind. And they found him someone to talk to, someone who listened. Have you ever been so sad that you needed someone to listen to you about how sad you were? Sometimes it can help. Days turned over slowly, one page at a time. Weeks rumbled past our front door. Months were stretchy like chewing gum. And then one day, Dad opened the window and the sun crept into our house. I made a cup of tea for him, and he said it tasted good. The gray shadows in the corners of the room grew smaller and smaller Do you see how the room seems to just look brighter now that Dad's beginning to feel better? I asked Dad if he wanted to go for a little walk. He said yes, and I held his hand. The sky winked a blue eye. Clouds smiled and every tree waved hello. Dad looked around. Then he looked down at me and picked me up in a great big squeezy hug. My dad was back. He smiled, and the colors were bright all around us. Wow. You know, when I think of that story, what I think about is how the little boy learned that how his dad was feeling wasn't his fault. His dad wasn't meaning to hurt him. But his dad just felt really, really sad and didn't know what to do about it. And it took going to talk to someone about it before he could figure out what to do, didn't it? Well, I want you all to know that if someone in your life is feeling really, really sad, it's not your fault, no matter how much it feels like it. And if you're feeling really sad, I want you to know that there are people in your life you can reach out to and talk to, because it's not your fault either. You can reach out to your parents or your teachers or maybe a friend. You can even reach out to Matt or even me, and we'll all be willing to sit and listen to how you're feeling. And maybe we'll be able to figure out how to make the gray go away, even if it's just a little bit. Well, thank you all for being here today and for listening to our story. And I hope you have such a great week. And we'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
The reading today is Selected Wisdom from the Firewood Collective. The Firewood Collective is a peer-run mental health collective offering mental health education and mutual aid through a healing justice lens, supporting the emotional wellness of all people and centering the needs of those most marginalized by our society. Their work seeks to disrupt the harm of systems of abuse and oppression, often reproduced by mental health systems. Reverend Chris is part of their peer support group on Facebook and recently asked the question, what would you like folks to know about mental health issues? These are some of the responses they received, uncensored but left anonymous. I've lived now for 20 years with a debilitating major depression, been hospitalized in a psychic ward 4 times to fight the battle of not killing myself. I am articulate, intelligent, financially successful, well-loved, and yet I can't find any of it and constantly feel unworthy. Drugs have helped, but having a community of faith surround you and hold the silence when you are in an episode is what has saved me. There is no cure for people with mental illness. It's a disease you need to learn to live with and to build a community of people that will not judge you or look down upon you. Walking with someone with mental illness is the key. That suffering is a reflection of others' fear. These are my thoughts. I go to the Unitarian Universalist Church too. We help by taking people's experiences seriously. People with lived experience need to be involved in decisions regarding their lives at every turn. Nothing about us without us. Who said that originally? I didn't commit it to memory. Anyway, My experience is social isolation can be the hardest part of this experience. There are places where they address it, like clubhouses, but they struggle sometimes because of funding. Peer support is very effective, formal and informal. Clubhouses are based on peer support and recovery. Not everything is accomplished through clinical solutions like psychology and psychiatry. People recover. What I mean is we can learn to cope and live with it. I am not my diagnoses. I am much more than that. I go to an Episcopal church. Throughout my entire life, and have thought about becoming Unitarian Universalist before, whenever I stop to think about it, faith seems more like the Beatles song, stuck in the middle with you. The one who moves us must have made no mistake somehow in making me turn out to be a liberal, queer, feminist, transgender woman of faith. The mental wellness paradigm is a form of social justice, as I understand it. Imperfect, as everything is, but justice. It has saved my life, and also nearly cost it occasionally, as a marginalized human being throughout the years. Lifelong mental wellness work. It's a labor of love. I recently found the phrase mental diversity used in place of mental illness. I think it's more accurate. Most creative people have mental diversity, which enables them to use what they've been given, even with its challenges, in amazing ways. Look to the history of just art and literature. It seems like many creative people would today have a diagnosis, but there was no DSM in those days, so probably less stigma as well.
I'm like one of those Japanese bowls that were made long ago. I have some cracks in me. They have been filled with gold. That's what they used back then, when they had a bowl to mend. It did not hide the cracks, it made them shine instead. So now every old scar shows from every time I broke, and anyone's eyes can see I'm not what I used to be. But in a collector's mind, all of these jagged lines make me more beautiful and worth a much higher price. I'm like one of those Japanese bowls. I was made long ago. I have some cracks, you can see how they shine of gold.
I do feel I need to give a content warning before I begin this morning that I am going to be giving some pretty frank discussion about suicidal ideation and mental health. If that's something you struggle with, I encourage you to watch this with someone who can support you, or to wait and watch it when you can be with that person. I'm going to kill myself, my friend told me through his sobs, his words echoing through my brain on a cold, rainy night that obviously hadn't been his best. In order to keep this story anonymous, I'm not going to tell you his name or where either of us were, but suffice it to say, my friend was walking on a bridge on his way home after a night out. He'd been depressed for some time, being unhappy with his progress in finding his job and the alienation he felt following graduation from university, as well as the end of a romantic relationship. I just didn't know how depressed he'd gotten. I was shocked and realized I didn't know what to do to support him in that moment. I was hours away from him, even by the fastest car, and didn't know his family well enough to know how to contact them. I offered my friend a few platitudes, told him it would be okay, basically anything I could think of to try to coax him off that bridge. Everything that I now know from Parker Palmer's wisdom doesn't work because people don't like to be fixed. The way he was crying, I believed he would do it. And I wanted to find just the right magical words to make things all right, just long enough for him not to kill himself. In that moment, I needed my friend to be okay in the fact that he wasn't, and that I didn't know how to stop it was beyond anything I knew how to handle. After a few minutes of pleading, my worst fear happened. He cried out, "I'm sorry," and the line went dead. I didn't know what else to do. I called 911 and told them everything I knew about his current situation and everything I knew about where he was. I contacted his ex-girlfriend and several of his friends on Facebook, hoping one of them would know how to get in touch with his parents. I basically put out an all-points bulletin on him and then just waited, hoping the worst hadn't just happened, that he was okay. I found out the next day that after the line went dead, he had stayed on that bridge for a few moments longer, but that he had eventually walked away and walked back home. Eventually, the police found his house and took him to the hospital for a half-hearted examination. The worst part, though, is our relationship has never quite been the same since. He's never fully trusted me after that. And I used to take the stance that at least he's alive, even if he hates me now. The more time that has passed, though, I wonder, were there other decisions I could have made that night? What could I have done differently that might have led to a different outcome? The truth is, I might never know how things might have been different had I been better prepared for a mental health crisis. That being said, I believe there are many people out there who would feel just as helpless as I did when confronted with such a time. How would you react if a family member or a loved one called you right now and told you they were on a bridge and wanted to die? Would you, like I did, clamor for the right words to say, grasping at anything, hoping that something would bring them enough comfort that they could back off? All the while, it turned out it was stuff that was making you feel better and not necessarily them. No easy answers. This entire sermon has no easy answers this morning. If you don't know how you would respond, or if you're divided like me, then don't feel bad. I believe our system does a particularly bad job of preparing us for the challenge of responding to the nearly 46.1 million people in the United States affected by mental health challenges every year. October is Mental Health Month, and as such, I see it as an opportunity to reflect on the impact of our systems on folks with mental health issues. But if you're like me, when our loved ones, our family and friends have a mental health crisis, you may struggle, like I did, to formulate a response that is both compassionate and helpful. One that will allow us to connect with the person in so many ways to help them feel like they're not alone. It's not surprising to me that so many of us struggle with how to respond to mental health. My colleague, the Reverend Barbara Myers, the president of the Unitarian Universalist Mental Health Network, calls mental health challenges the No-Casserole diseases. By this, she means that when someone in our communities are diagnosed with cancer, they will be showered with love, affection, support, and offers of help. Casseroles left in their houses in such droves that they struggle to eat them all. However, it's an unfortunate reality that people are a lot less to offer such support to someone who has attempted suicide or is in a manic or depressive episode. Instead, folks going through mental health crises, as well as their families and friends, are much more likely to be isolated in their times of need, to not have anyone reach out and try to connect with them. Myers says in her book, Held, Showing Up for Each Other's Mental Health, that a mental health crisis can affect every aspect of a person's life, from emotional to physical, financial to occupational, social to intellectual, and even environmental. Because mental health affects so many aspects of our lives, such an emergency immediately becomes spiritual in nature, if by spiritual we mean that it leads to the questioning of everything a person believes and holds dear. Our deepest held beliefs and values can find themselves interrogated as a person like my friend struggles to put the of their lives together. And it is in these times when folks could use support the most that they often find themselves the most isolated, victims of the No-Casserole disease, because people are scared. It's not that folks are uncaring, it's just we don't know what to say. This sort of alienation at a person's time of greatest need can lead to an existential crisis as the person feels that no one understands them or wants to be there for them, and that the world is essentially cruel and offers no solace. I know all of this is true because of my own personal experiences with mental health challenges. The diagnoses aren't important. Let's just say that, like many in my family before me, I have struggled with depression, anxiety, and hypomania for much of my adult life. For many people, it was just too much. There is no worse feeling than knowing that you are too much in the moment for a friend or loved one. It becomes a vicious pit that I fell deeper and deeper into the more I felt abandoned and misunderstood. Now, granted, there were times when I probably was a bit much, even for myself, when people felt I couldn't be reasoned with, that there was nothing to be done. I'm choosing to take a more compassionate view, however. I believe that these folks didn't mean to be cold and turn me into the bearer of a no-casserole disease. It's just that, like me, they didn't know how to respond to someone in the midst of a mental health crisis. So much so that my talking about it openly like this is a first in my family. We keep it secret. We don't talk about what's gone before me. We typically aren't taught in our schools or our families about how to respond to mental health. So when these skills are necessary, we end up either fleeing, as they did in my case, or trying to soothe our own anxiety to the situation, as I believe I was doing, talking to my friend on the bridge. And this creates a stigma so heavy that some people don't even bother trying to seek help. I know that there was a time that had I stood before you as a minister and admitted I have mental health challenges, my fitness for ministry would have been questioned, and I would have been advised by Boston to resign and seek help, even with no evidence it was impeding my work. Just so, in our society, people are so often stigmatized out of work, homes, and even family and friend circles because of fear of what a mental health diagnosis means. In fact, years ago, when I was trying to figure out what kind of ministry was right for me, I very, very briefly examined military chaplaincy. Did you know that I'm ineligible to ever serve as a military chaplain because I have sought treatment for my mental health? Yeah, it's an automatic rejection. In the words of actress Glenn Close, what mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation. Sometimes things turn out just fine. My friend and I were both resilient enough and had enough privilege and support to emerge on the other side. Other folks aren't so lucky and never emerge from their mental health crises, some even ultimately ending their lives. Our age has been called an age of anxiety, and I am convinced that if we truly want to build a more compassionate system where everyone can find loving community, then we must each learn the skills to help a person through a mental health crisis, as well as build places that support folks when they or their loved ones are facing their toughest challenges. Now, you might have noticed that throughout this sermon that I've avoided using the common term mental illness. I don't have any problem if you use it. but I've avoided doing so because I don't necessarily view what I've went through as an illness or a disorder, but my brain and body reacting to a lifetime of both immediate and generational trauma the only way it knew how. And although the current medical model likes to emphasize chemical imbalance as an explanation for mental health crises, I align myself with thinkers who think that it's probably more complicated than the simple nature versus nurture binary, and that a biopsychosocial model that looks at biological, psychological, and social causes is much more holistic and allows each person to be treated as a product of their individual and collective histories, rather than as a mechanistic organism who can be cured with a simple solution. In fact, had it not been for the warning signs of depression and anxiety in my late teens, I might not have ever known anything was wrong with my life and been challenged to find new ways to sustain myself. My leaving the fundamentalist church of my youth, coming out as a queer person, entering college in my mid-20s, and even become a Unitarian Universalist and subsequently entering seminary. I consider these all deeply existential moments that came following mental health crises, though I would never wish what I went through on anyone. And I'm not sure that I would redo it the same way if I had the chance. I would not be this person that I am today had I not. That's why I like the contribution from the reading this morning, that we think of folks with mental health challenges as the mentally diverse rather than the mentally ill, because it doesn't stigmatize them. In fact, it holds them up when they are seeking the help that they need. Now, to clear up a misconception that often comes up in these conversations is that I'm not saying psychiatric drugs are bad or that they should never be tried. Personally, I've never gotten much out of them, but for others, they have been life-affirming and life-saving. The point that I'm hoping to make this morning is that each person's challenges are different, and a standard cure of pills and therapy can be not just ineffective, but actively harmful. That goes for much of our system, which is currently ineffective or harmful towards people who don't fit within the norm of mental wellness. This is a social justice issue so often overlooked, and I believe much systemic change is needed to give mentally diverse folks the tools they need to live their best lives. Much of this will mean advocating for legislation to ensure that financial considerations never need to be weighed into whether a person seeks treatment or not, and social advocacy to remove the stigma associated with mental health, to mean that no one ever needs fear losing their job or their place of residence in order to seek treatment. So what can we as a faith community do? Reverend Myers believes, and I agree with her, that Unitarian Universalist congregations have the potential to be hubs of change within the world. Imagine if, as a person was struggling with the existential questions in their lives, they had a safe place within each of our congregations to do the hard work of healing through a mental health crisis. Imagine if our congregations were places people knew they could go for safe and non-judgmental listening over a cup of tea with a friendly face. Just think what it would be like if every one of our congregations were hubs for support groups and peer mental health networks, where folks heard the name Unitarian Universalism and knew that this was a place they would be loved and cared for. It would not be a cure-all for the pain of mental illness, but sometimes in the words of one of my respondents from the Fireweed Collective, walking with someone with mental illness is the key. What will you do to actively change our system to support rather than stigmatize the mentally diverse? For my part, I've enrolled in a virtual emotional CPR training next month that will give me the tools to respond to folks in the midst of a mental health crisis like my friend, to show me how I could have better held him in the moment of his greatest need, to show how we can connect. And connection is the key to everything that follows. It might not seem like a lot, but I suspect that if more folks were willing to take active steps like this, if such classes became as common and expected as first aid and physical CPR certification, we could go a long way towards supporting folks in engaging their challenges and meeting them where they are. And if you're going through a mental health crisis, or if you have a history of mental diversity, I want to look at you and tell you that I love you. And I believe this congregation loves you because I've observed them over the last year and a half. I've observed us over the last year and a half. And you are like one of those Japanese bowls filled with gold. And I leave you today with the words of children's educator and entertainer Fred Rogers. Anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be more manageable. When we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. Let us start a conversation about mental health and how to support folks with mental diversity, no matter how hard it may seem at first. Because as the wise Mr. Rogers points out, the conversation itself can go a long way towards helping folks feel less alone in the world that so often stigmatizes those who are different. May it be so. I would like to invite you to join in our closing hymn, which is hymn number 100 in the gray hymnal. I've got peace like a river. The words will be shared on screen.
I'll give you the intro.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul.
Please join us now for the song benediction.
Go forth into the world in peace, in peace. Be of good courage, hold fast that which is good. Go forth into the world in peace, in peace. Love all people rejoicing in the power of the Spirit. Go in peace.
Our benediction is from Elena Westbrook. Go in hope, for the arc of the universe is long, and we can bend it toward justice. Go in courage, for together we have the strength to confront injustice in our daily lives and the larger world. Go in love, because a holy and generous love is both the reason and the means by which we transform our lives. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace.